Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and yes, I'm back from vacation in a much better week as we got Post Malone, Lady Gaga, Bruno Mars, and it's a Billboard Breakdown. I don't remember. You know, maybe it's just the makeup call from last week's truly awful episode where, full disclosure, actually putting it all together was a nightmare in terms of getting the footage in coherent condition even before having to deal with terrible music. But thankfully, following up on that vacation review on the main channel, we have, as I predicted, the album bomb from Post Malone. And what do you know? It's spread out enough on the Hot 100 to be one of the more reasonable album bombs for me to handle. That's nice of him. And from Nashville radio at large, although given the list of collaborators and Post Malone's usual vector of streaming success, maybe that's the reason the success doesn't feel quite as concentrated. You'd think this might have done a little bit better given the success through the rest of the year, because that feels relevant in our top 10, because much to my surprise, a bar song Tipsy by Shaboozey held the number one, despite losing the top spot on both streaming and sales, but it's got enough of a margin in both categories, and it's still on top on the radio, albeit wavering. Apparently that was enough. So what the hell happened with I Had Some Help by Post Malone featuring Morgan Wallen stuck at number 2? Well, the radio started falling off sharply at perhaps the worst possible time, offsetting any streaming gains this week, and there just wasn't any sales push even made in order to shore up the margin. Now compare this to our big new arrival this week, Die With a Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars at number 3. We'll get into the song itself later, but this looks to be a case of smart marketing across the board. It surged to the top on sales, delivered strong streaming, and while it's got a ways to go to catch up on the radio, it's certainly working there. It's a song that's built for the radio. And hell, that was enough to get over Not Like Us by Kendrick Lamar at number 4, where if I were to place a bet on a song fading out pretty fast, it might be this one. Streaming is down, there's another album bomb coming next week which will predominantly impact streaming, and radio looks like it's peaked. If it regains any position, it'll be because songs above it have fallen back. Next we got Birds of a Feather by Billie Eilish at number 5, and this is a case where the radio push is very pronounced alongside rock solid streaming, and that's really the edge it had to pull over Good Luck Babe by Chappell Roan at number 6, which was literally jumped on the radio advantage while her own streaming held up. Now all this is bad news, for now, for Espresso by Sabrina Carpenter down to number 7. This won't last. It's gonna rebound next week with the album bomb, and it even picked up radio positioning thanks to songs above it losing, but the streaming losses knocked it lower despite its radio inertia. And then we got Million Dollar Baby by Tommy Richmond slipping down to number 8. I would call this real freefall across the board, especially with trends going into next week, but that will put it alongside Please 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 by Sabrina Carpenter at number 9, which I think will also rebound, but at least the radio is behind it a little bit more. Finally, clinging on to the bottom spot, we got Lose Control by Teddy Swims at number 10. Really the only factor here, he's got multiple losers beneath him that's keeping him propped up. And that naturally takes us to said losers and dropouts. And there are actually a few big ones this week in the latter category. The largest of note, funnily enough, is Feather by Sabrina Carpenter. It's handily clinching a year-end list spot. She's fine, but it might be much closer for Euphoria by Kendrick Lamar. And then there are songs like Illusion by Dua Lipa and Sweet Dreams by Ko Wetzel. They look like they're gonna fall well short. I can't say I'm complaining about that. And as I expected, on an album bomb week, there's a lot of losers, so let's start off with the debuts that collapsed. It's Up by Drake, Young Thug, and 21 Savage collapsed to 46, and Evergreen by Richie Mitch and the Coal Miners fell down to 99. Brief correction from last week, there actually is an extended version of the song that was released somewhat recently with just this band on it. Doesn't really override how underwritten the song is, but the correction's needed. Then, with some continued losers, we got High Road by Ko Wetzel and Jesse Murph down to 51, no complaints, and Lunch by Billie Eilish crashing down to 68. Might as well throw in Chihiro down significantly to 93. Then we have the gains that fell back, and especially with Chappell Roan, and it'll be interesting to see how many of these songs ultimately rebound, given that they're then facing Sabrina Carpenter directly next week. Casual fell to 73, Feminine Phenomenon hit 82, and My Kink is Karma lost all its gains down to 94. are. We'll see how they come back. Next, let's take a look at country, because Post Malone's new album is directly positioned to cannibalize from Music Row, and as such, there were some considerable mainstream country losses. Bulletproof by Nate Smith down to 58, You'll Look Like You Love Me by Ella Langley featuring Riley Green at 61, Chevrolet by Dustin Lynch and Jelly Roll at 71, Hang Tight Honey by Lainey Wilson at 77, she might get a boost next week, Wind Up Missing You by Tucker Wetmore at 81, I Think I'm in Love With You by Chris Stapleton and Dua Lipa at 85, and American Nights by Zach Bryan at 100. Now the rest are pretty scattered, all things considered. From the bottom up, You My Everything by Sexy Red and Drake at 95, Devil Is a Lie by Tommy Richmond at 92, I Love You I'm Sorry by Gracie Abrams at 90, Belong Together by Mark Amber at 89, Si No Quieres No by Luis R. Conriquez and Netten Vega at 86, The Boy Is Mine by Ariana Grande at 75, Lonely Road by Machine Gun Kelly and Jelly Roll at 74, Help Me by Real Boston Richie at 72, Band for Band by Central C and Lil Baby at 70, Gotta Only by Floyd Menor and Chris MJ at 69, Mamushi by Megan Thee Stallion and Yuki Chiba at 52, and finally a pair of losses for Charlie XCX, Apple down to 62, and the remix of Guess with Billie Eilish at 33. And naturally, the story is going to go to our gains because no returns this week, and it's all Post Malone here. There's only 2 gains, and they are Pour Me a Drink with Blake Shelton up to 13, and Guy For That with Luke Combs up to 17. And since we are in big album bomb territory with 15 new songs, I'm covering the best, the worst, and those in the top 20. And what do you know? None of the songs got up that high. None of the new ones. How nice. So for all the rest, Never Love You Again with Sierra Ferrell at 78. Someone tell these dudes to actually let her match them and not just place her on backing tracks. Devil I've Been with ERNEST at 66. This is a real vintage 90s country song that nearly clinched one of the honorable mentions. Hide My Gun with Hardy at 65. Missin' You Like Me with Luke Combs at 63. Goes Without Saying with Brad Paisley at 60. Have the Heart with Dolly Parton at 56. Was very nearly among the worst because, my god, the production on Dolly Parton's voice is a disaster. Yours at 54, Finer Things with Hank Williams Jr. at 42, What Don't Belong to Me at 40, Losers with Jelly Roll at 25, and Wrong Ones with Tim McGraw at 23. So now on to a pretty healthy list of new arrivals. Let's actually first start off with number 98, Sailor Song by Gigi Perez.
And when you get a taste, can you tell me what's my flavor? I don't believe in God, but I believe that you're my savior. My mom says that she's worried, but I'm covered in disfavor.
Alright, starting with an act I actually was not familiar with. A pop folk singer-songwriter who blew up off, what do you know, TikTok, and with this song, and you know what? I hear the appeal. The hazy, cycling horn melody that builds into the choppy acoustic strumming, the tighter multi-tracking of Perez's deeper but yelping vocals remind me a lot of late 2000s folk music, and the decidedly lesbian framing of wanting to cling on to this steamy relationship luxuriate in the relief of finally finding someone, at least until their paths inevitably diverge, which given how much the hook focuses on the sailor imagery, that seems like something that Perez thinks is inevitable, but she's comfortable with holding on to it. I think if I have any issues with the song, outside of the very obvious points of influence, it might come with how melodically it doesn't really develop that much into that hook. The vocals might be a bit louder, but the lead melody could afford to show more flair, change it up. It feels like the song is really crying out for more of a dramatic climax. But outside of that, yeah, you know what? Decent Torch song. I can see it working. Not sure how long it's gonna last, but yeah, it's solid. I'll take it. Number 97, New Woman by Lisa featuring ROSALIA.
Focus on my mind, taking my time. I'm a new woman. Bitch, you better swerve. Driving up my aura. Focus on my mind, taking my time. I'm a new woman.
I guess I'm not that surprised that Lisa is going to work with ROSALIA. Their vamping at least falls in similar territory, even if I think ROSALIA is more experimental. But when your main producer is Max Martin because you really want that stateside hit, I get the feeling experimentation was not the intention here. And you can tell Max Martin's firmly locked into that wiry synth pop lane he was giving The Weeknd a couple years back, with the fizzy program percussion and the oily pulse of that groove. Although the scratches tossed in are certainly a choice, choice, at least until the song switches up completely for ROSALIA's verse, where the bass just crushes out the mix into the sort of tone-shattering trap breakdown. Doesn't match the tempo or vibe of the song at all. Granted, some of this might be the attempt to fuse together the styles. Lisa's cocky Blackpink flexing doesn't have the same sultry sensuality of ROSALIA's, although they try to find some common ground in the lyrics, working that metaphor of purple bruises into gold. But I'm sorry, the girl boss vibes of the song feel so clinical, lacking in chemistry. They barely register as feeling that special. I don't know, it feels like an attempt to brute force a global hit with all the pieces that could work, but the final song lacks a lot to me. I can't call this good. I'd say skip it. Number 91, Pretty Slowly by Benson Boone.
All the lovely things we hate now. Where did we go? Where did we go? Oh, I don't know. But I know it feels like somewhere far away from home.
Anyone else feel like Benson Boone's moment is already running on fumes? I mean, he's had hits this year. Stay tuned for my worst list when I revisit them. But after TikTok and Universal resolved their pissing match, outside of Beautiful Things, the whole Benson Boone phenomenon seems to have faded in favor of much better music. And I think Benson Boone might himself understand that, as this is apparently a single prepared for the next album, and oh wow, someone really wants to be Noah Kahan with that vocal patter, the soft acoustics and piano, and let's not forget the kick drum stomp clap. But honestly, that comparison might not be fully apt. With the piano taking a lot more attention on the hook, I was honestly reminded a lot more of the piano rock that proliferated in the late 2000s and early 2010s, alongside the club boom from artists like Gavin DeGraw, often produced by Ryan Tedder. I mean, at least Ryan Tedder knew how to let the bombast have some mix depth and not sound so forced as Boone starts caterwauling in his excruciating upper register. It's actually a little bit strange that for as much as Benson Boone wants to rock a bit harder, his guitars have no texture. There's no swell to all his grand crescendos. They feel so two-dimensional. Producer Evan Blair doesn't have much in the way of respectable credits. Maybe he's a larger part of the problem than has been properly examined. But you know what, to Benson Boone's credit, and my utter shock, I think the lyrics here might be what saves the song. It's a post-breakup track where the strongest emotions might be existential confusion, balanced out with acceptance, where he can't even really blame his ex for leaving, and while there's a sliver of that affection left, he thinks, they're speeding away in the opposite directions of each other, probably for the better, and it feels like when he committed to the breakup, he just had to keep moving to blow past any of his own second guessing, and the song utilizes that kinetic energy rather effectively. So yeah, as someone who does not like Benson Boone, and maybe just appreciates this more because he's cosplaying as Noah Kahan, I think there's a part of me that might be able to defend this song. It is far from great, maybe not even good, but I can tolerate it. Number 83, Mexico by Post Malone featuring Billy Strings.
Shade of a coconut tree, and love said go to hell, but there's somewhere I'd rather be. So it's M-E-X-I-C-O for me.
So okay, one thing that went a bit underappreciated with Post Malone's country experiment is that he can kind of be funny when he wants to be. So pairing him up with indie country star Billy Strings for a fast-picking bluegrass-tinged bit of rollicking fun, that's a nice touch. It's a good choice, especially when you ramp up the pedal steel and saloon piano and fiddle for one of the most warm and playful mixes on the entire album, certainly one of the most up-tempo. And yes, there are absolutely the fast-picked acoustic solos that are followed by great fiddle and pedal steel. They sound great. I know some folks are complaining that the pedal steel is a bit quiet. I hear it, but I think the larger nitpick is that Billy Strings really could have been given a little more to do than just backing vocals for the hook. But the larger observation here is that this song's hilarious. It's basically a screwball comedy where Post Malone keeps trying to hook up with girls all across America and Mexico, and, well, hijinks ensue, before he ultimately winds up getting locked up in a Mexican prison, and the vacation suddenly got a lot longer. Hell, I normally don't like hooks where you spell out the word, but this one actually works for me. It's a great little deep cut. I got no illusions it's gonna stick around, but it is so much fun when it's here. If you haven't heard it, check it out. Number 50, Nosedive by Post Malone featuring Lainey Wilson.
Sometimes you're balling, but there's still beauty in the nosedive.
Whereas Whereas on the flip side with this song, you know, Post Malone's never really pushed a pop crossover ballad as a hit. No, I Fall Apart does not count, shut up. Hell, I wouldn't even say Candy Paint or Sunflower or Morning fall in that territory. I'm talking about the song that could become a real radio staple long term. Normally the third single from the album that maybe even hits adult contemporary radio. Nosedive is probably the closest that Post Malone has gotten to this. Maybe Wasting Angels could have fit, but this feels built for that. The reverb twinkle of the lead acoustic guitar with electric guitar and fiddle embellishments that might be a bit overproduced, but I didn't mind it. The big lighters in the air hook. Lainey Wilson as the partner with whom he actually has decent chemistry, and who sounds halfway decent inside Post Malone's usual reverb-heavy mix. Hell, it even directly references and then inverts Poison's Every Rose Has Its Thorn, and one of the more striking melodic elements of the album. Yeah, that song's one of the dumbest hair metal ballads, but it's also a personal favorite of mine going back decades. I really liked that. And you know, I really like the airplane metaphor stretched across the song too, which is almost so ridiculous, it does not work. What's romantic about a plane crash or a plane going into a nosedive? But poetically, there's a sort of beauty in that odd feeling of falling in love, which can feel like falling out of the sky, especially when you got that bone-deep feeling that it could all fall apart, even as you have to find a way to ride out through the turbulence. But honestly, listen to this. I hear the long-awaited pop crossover for Lainey Wilson, and a song that could easily become a staple for Post Malone that he can play for the rest of his life. I mean, part of it kind of reminds me of Two Most Wanted by Beyonce and Miley Cyrus from earlier this year, in that it's such an obvious old school hit record, you could write the promotional treatment in your sleep, but unlike Beyonce, who has apparently outgrown the need for hits, this could well stick around. I hope it does. Excellent song. Number 34, California Sober by Post Malone featuring Chris Stapleton.
These lips try.
You ever hear a song where you're sure it should be way better, but the central foundation of the song is just fundamentally broken? Yeah, this is one where I'm frankly shocked on how it just does not work across the board remotely. I'm almost at a loss of how to describe it. That central brighter acoustic line and fiddle, it's not bad with the cycling progression, but they're trying to marry it to this lockstep swampy groove with a little bit too much reverb all around, one of the more overproduced songs here, and it just comes across as like seasick and unstable, especially when Post Malone and Stapleton try to harmonize together, and it's shockingly messy and slapdash. But then they just start hollering really early on the song, elongating notes way too long, and then they sound like they're sinking into the reverb. It's just really ugly. Then we got the content where apparently they pitched up the hitchhiker, and that hitchhiker proceeded to drink all their whiskey, smoke all their pot, rob them blind, and then leave them behind with a wink and a smile. I know it's supposed to be a joke song that they got screwed over by this woman, but the punchline is so weak, with the final line that if they find a wall across that stretch of highway, it's gotta be Post Malone's discarded one. Yeah, this reminds me way too much of the sleazy, quasi-jokey boogie rock country songs of the mid-70s that just fucking suck. Low-grade crap by everyone involved. They should really know better. Bad song, skip it. And finally, number 3, Die With a Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars.
With a smile, if the world was ending, I'd wanna be next to you.
You know, I'm honestly surprised this collab did not happen sooner. They're both consummate performers, both highly theatrical with distinct nostalgic ties to the past, both probably missing a little bit of substance in their larger catalog, but their best hits are remarkable. This makes all kinds of sense, especially when they get James Fauntleroy coming up for the co-write, and DeMille reprising Silk Sonic production credits to team up with Watt for the real assist here. This is an all-star cast. And you know, I feel like this is the sort of track that will probably grow on me with time, but it's not quite there yet. An impeccably produced 70s soul ballad with a surprising amount of well-balanced guitar muscle, with a great bass line even before Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga deliver some pretty damn good vocal chemistry and harmonies on this whole love together at the end of the world song. But that's kind of all it is. It's a similar critique of Silk Sonic that the pastiche was all that some seemed to see that was there, but at least they had some loose humor. They write sensual music, and honestly went a little further. I think, again, their debut was kind of underrated. This is played more straight in the vein of a classic power ballad that does not feel as sexy. It feels like it's missing that little touch to make it feel more special. Maybe actually have the guitar solo on the instrumental passage, or cut loose with a saxophone or an organ or a synthesizer, or maybe just add a bit more grit to make it feel like a proper 70s throwback. But as it is, it's a real nice song. I'm just not hearing that extra lift just yet. It might grow on me, but as it is, just good. Not great. But that was our week. Yeah, much better than the last one, where if my worst is California Sober by Post Malone and Chris Stapleton, with a dishonorable mention going to New Woman by Lisa and Rosalia, that's pretty damn good, all things considered. As for the best, yeah, it's a narrow race, but I think Post Malone has it, with Nosedive with Lainey Wilson just edging out Mexico with Billy Strings. It is real damn close. Next week, yeah, all Sabrina Carpenter. Stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.